Welcome to the lecture on Chapter 4, Project Integration Management. Now, software developers, this is not integrating your software into a larger project or your function routine into a working program. This is how to implement a project across, actually, your whole company. So in this chapter, we're going to look at what's the overall framework of project integration, of course, how it relates to the other knowledge areas and the life cycle. We'll discuss the planning process, different types of project selection techniques, importance of creating a project charter, what is the project management plan development, how is it created, how do these plans help with the project. We're going to look at project execution and its relationship to project planning. We'll look at the principles of various aspects of project integration. We'll look at the monitoring, controlling, how the change control process and how it helps managing your project changes. We all know that projects change, program requirements change, developers make assumptions on what the requirements are, and when they're found that they may be incorrect or need to be tweaked, they need to have a process to make sure that it gets implemented into the project. We'll look at the importance for developing good procedures and how to close a project, and then how software can help assist, and then kind of look at some of the changes between differences between agile development and adaptive environments. So what is project integration management? Well, project management, we've got to coordinate all the other knowledge areas of a project lifecycle. We just don't look at one aspect. We have to look at everything. So the trouble is when you're a new project manager, it's hard seeing the big picture. Let's say you were a software expert and got promoted to be the project manager. You know the software side, but you don't know the financials. You don't know the other, maybe the parties involved, how you're going to check the quality, how you're going to maintain it in the future. Remember when I got promoted from being a team leader of like 20-some programmers to their project manager, actually their direct manager. I was very good at solving the program's problems, but it took a while to understand how to deal with the people and the customers. We'd have big customer meetings that customers bring their new requests in, and I go, yeah, we can do that. That's an easy fix. And I can see my developers in the back going, maybe for you, but that seems to be a large undertaking. So sometimes new project managers just have that trouble seeing that big picture. They get so focused in what they were experts in. Project integration management is not the same thing as software integration. It is a whole lot more than that. So what are some of the major processes involved? Well, you got to develop a project charter. What is this project? I got to develop what a project management plan is. How are we going to manage the work in the project? How are we going to control it and monitor it? How are we going to perform change control? And then how do we close it? Now, you look at those and like, well, those are different areas in project management, but this integration, I've got to make sure all this stuff comes together. They are, even though they're separate functions and knowledge areas, they're all interrelated, and that's what this project integration management phase is all about. This slide's a little hard to read. I'll let you look at it in the textbook. I think it's figure 4.1 on page 71, but it basically gives the overview of the different areas and to kind of how does it interface with the knowledge of work. So what can go wrong? Or they got a story in there about a Phoenix system project to kind of reduce the payroll. We all know when payroll doesn't work, it's a disaster. So you just got to make sure that they were trying to reduce, payroll processing, overhead, and staffing costs, and it was probably one of the worst government-managed implementations ever. So it can become pretty disastrous. Now, strategic planning and project selection. One of the big things with project integration is which projects are we actually going to work on. So strategic planning basically involves determining what are the long-range goals. You got to analyze the strengths and weaknesses of the organization. You have to, what are the opportunities and threats? Try to make a best guess of future needs. What did your customers want? What do they need? Maybe just me to add a new feature, or I need to revamp an entire system. So I want to make sure I'm projecting, the need for the future. I don't want to spend $1 million on a new project if nobody's going to use it. So I got to make sure I understand what we're going to invest our resources in. Now, one of the tools that can be used is SWOT analysis: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And what you do is you go through and analyze each one of those and kind of compare how to make that, can I build on my strengths? Can I remove my weaknesses? So on and so forth. So you want to make sure that's one tool you can use. Now, there's different ways of identifying potential projects, and we'll go through a couple of those. And I want to make sure that the IT part of this planning process aligns with what the company's business does. I'm not going to develop a tool or a software package that is contrary to the goals of the corporation. So it's keeping those things in line. Now, here's an example of a SWOT analysis. Now, they're just using a mind map tool just to kind of graphically lay out each of those 4 areas: strengths, weaknesses, threats, and opportunities, and go through and identify each one of those. And at some point in time, you say, okay, I've got an opportunity, so what do I need to do to make some of these things happen, to take advantage of the opportunities? I got to put a project proposal together for a potential customer that's looking to us bid. I got to look at ways of advertising my company. Maybe on the weaknesses, maybe we have no clear marketing plan, so I need to develop one. Or maybe nobody has any strength in accounting, so I need to hire an accountant or a business manager. So it's just taking this advantage to analyze the strengths and weaknesses of your company. Now, there are some other planning processes. You got to make sure if you're looking at the different stages on a general statement, you got resource allocation. What resources do we have? I got to plan those resources. What are the potential projects? What are the scopes? What are the benefits, constraints that are on these projects? Are there key business processes that need to benefit from this IT project? And then, of course, I got to tie the information technology strategy with the mission of the vision of the organization, identifying the key business areas. So sometimes project managers get stuck in these bottom 2 areas and they forget the strategic area or the business side of the equation. Now, one of the best practices is in 2017, Fortune released their Business by Design list, highlighted 24 companies they believe are using technology and globalization for a competitive analysis. So Apple, Dyson, Samsung, Capital One, are examples of the 2017. Take a look at that article. Methods for selecting projects. So now you've analyzed your strengths and weaknesses. One of the things you need to do is say, hey, which of these projects am I going to choose? I need to take a list. I got limited resources. I need to manage. I got to select. I got to narrow down the list of wants into something that we can actually do. So what I can do, some of the methods, you can focus on broad organization needs. Maybe you can categorize your IT projects. Maybe you can perform a present, net present value or other financial indicators. What's the big bang for the buck? Am I going to get enough money out of this? Can I sell this? Maybe I can use a weighted scale, identify some key factors and put a weight by those factors, and then take each project and say, okay, let me score each one of those. And then, of course, the one that has the highest score is the one you want to use. Implemented balanced scorecard. It's a couple of theories out on that. So if I'm looking at broad organizational needs, things like, okay, I got to improve the safety, I got to increase morale. But one of the things you're going to need to see when I'm looking at broad organization, I got to understand the need. I got to understand who's going to pay for it, and what is their will? How much are they going to see this through? When problems happen, are they motivated enough to see it through? Because sometimes senior management they say, yeah, I want that. And then the first problem hits, a first milestone that's missed, they're bailing, and so you got to make sure. Now, categorizing IT projects, could be anywhere from responding to a problem, an opportunity or device. How long will it take to development? When is it needed? What is the overall priority? So you can categorize all your projects based on some of those types of things. Now, as far as financial, analysis, some of the methods use net present value, return on investment. How fast am I going to get my payback? I'm going to spend $1 million, but when am I going to get my money back? And is it going to take me 10 years to get it back or 1 year to get it back? All those are decisions that could be used in deciding which project you're going to do. Now, look at some of the financial ones. Net present value, basically just it's a calculating expected monetary gain or loss based on developing this project. By kind of looking at what are the future cash flows and inflows and outflows to determine what's that value. The higher net present value, the better the project is. There's plenty of spreadsheets out there to do the calculations, but here you're just getting, how much am I going to increase every year? How much money am I expecting? How much my cost going to go on? And say, hey, am I going to do this? So just another calculation on net present value. There are plenty of spreadsheets out there. Excel's got plenty of standard packages that you can use to do this calculation. The calculations are, you're determining the costs over the life of the project. You're going to turn, what its discounted rate is, or you're going to determine what its present value is. But when you're doing, if you're going to do this as a process, and usually you've got a bean counter as a chief executive or chief technical officer. That's where I worry about how much money am I going to make out of it versus maybe other aspects. You want to make sure that how much investment is going to be in year one and for a number of years into the project. How much am I going to discount? How much of the money going to increase is going to be the prime rate? There's going to be some other discounted rates as far as cost. Are the costs going to be entered as negative numbers or positive numbers? Things of that nature. Now, the return on investment is basically calculated by subtracting project costs from the benefits and then dividing them by the costs. So it's got this very simple formula. So total discounted benefits minus total discounted costs divided by discounted cost gets you a return on investment. Higher return on investment, the better. Many organizations have a required return, so what they think is acceptable, and that'll be set on, based on what your financial account is. One analysis is the payback analysis, and basically payback is the amount of time it will take to recoup all the money you're going to put in. So it's kind of a form of a cash flow analysis, and it looks like total dollars invested and at what time, when are my sales going to exceed, and when are my profits going to exceed what it cost me to get in that. Some organizations have a length of time. I want payback in 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever the case may be. And just a payback analysis chart says, yeah, here are my costs and here are my benefits. How much money am I making? And at some point in time, my benefits start exceeding my costs, and that's your payback. And some companies say, I want it 1 year, 2 year, 3 year. Depends on your financial sovereignty, how good a company you've got. Now, the weighted scoring model basically is just a systematic process in selecting, and basically you identify criteria that's important to the project. You assign weights to it. I do this setting up your grades. I make assign different categories, assignments and tests and midterms and finals, and each one of those are weighted. And then based on your score, you multiply by the weight, you got your grade. Same thing happens here as far as setting up projects. You set the criteria, you assign weights to the criteria, and then see what your scores are. So here's just a sample. Looks like your grades. 100%. No, that's your weight. So now implemented balanced scorecard. A couple of doctors developed this approach, select and manage projects to align with a business strategy. So it's just a strategic planning and management system that helps organize things. I've never used it, but it's definitely an option that you can use. Now, we've chose our project. Now we got to develop a charter. Now, it's important to let the rest of the organization that this project has now been blessed by the powers to be implemented. So it kind of formally recognizes the existence of the project. It identifies the key stakeholders. I mean, they could sign the project charter, so they're putting their commitment to supporting this long term. But this charter could be a key output in that initialization process. Now, some of the things that could go into a project charter, the business case, the management plan, whatever agreements there may be, enterprise environmental factors, organization processes, assets we're going to put in the project. So how do I develop now the project management plan? Well, the project management plan is used to coordinate all the project planning documents. So it isn't managing the project right now. It's just what documents am I going to use to manage this? And some of the common ones are an overview of the project, the description how the project's organized, management technical processes used, work to be done, list of that, schedule and budget information, references to other project documents. So here's just a rough sample that IEEE kind of puts in together, section topics and things that can go into those plans. Now, directing and managing the work, this involves managing and performing the work that you guys put in the project plan. Majority of time is spent on the execution of the project, as we saw in last chapter. The application during the project directly reported, to the project execution, and the project manager needs to stay focused on leading the project team and the stakeholder relationships to make sure this plan works correctly. It's easy to manage the team. Sometimes it's managing the stakeholder relationships that can be the tricky part of the equation. Coordinating and planning execution. Planning and execution are pretty much intertwined. The major function of creating project management is to guide through this execution. Those who will do the work should help plan the work. I usually like to make sure my developers give me development estimates. Sometimes they know, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they'll have to go back on past history as far as other things they've done. Sometimes it's totally new and we have no clue. And then we're making some guesses, and hopefully they're educated guesses. One of the things is making sure I got strong leadership and supportive culture. So I want to make sure that one of the project managers got to lead by example. He's got to show the importance of creating this culture and making sure things are important to get executed on time. Because organization culture can help the project execution by one, getting, the process and guidelines and templates, but it also helps knowing that your project is respected by the rest of the organization. Now, there are some things that sometimes project managers need to break the rules. Sometimes I've had to take it where, the schedule says, I need to ship a machine from point A to point B. It's going to take 4 weeks to make that shipment. To give the developers more time to test it out, instead of putting it on a boat, I'm going to put it on an airplane. It may cost $300,000 to do it, but it may have been worth it, and that's a manager still need to break some of the rules, and sometimes those are career affecting, sometimes they're not. So some things that went right, 2015 PMI found that 12% of the organizations are only considered to be high performers. And that over all their years they've been doing this study, that 12% seems to be maintaining pretty consistent. Organization must make major cultural changes to improve. Sometimes you got to make sure that everybody fully understands the value of the project management function. Sometimes project managers just seen as another boss and no impact on the project. I got to make sure that the senior executives are fully engaged and the projects we're doing align with the organization. Now, sometimes we have to capitalize on product, business, and application knowledge areas. Sometimes the IT project managers have to have prior technical experience. On small projects, we may have to do some of the work too. But on larger projects, I got to understand my problem is not so much what the developers are doing, but I may have to understand more the business and application area of the project more than how to turn a widget or how to develop a new website. But I got to understand where that website fits in the business side of it. Now, some of the tools that project managers use, granted, your senior project manager use their expert judgments. One of probably the biggest things we use is meetings, is talking to people. It's making sure we're all on the same page, making sure that what was discussed at the meeting, everybody buys into, and if there's action that comes out of those meetings, follow up to make sure they're done. And of course, there's always information systems that'll help us do that, whether it's an online tool, whether it's Microsoft Project. There are plenty of information systems out there. Now, some of the knowledge we need to understand, sometimes it's explicit knowledge, where it's easy to explain and a few pictures you can understand it. Sometimes it's tactic knowledge, and really that tactic knowledge is difficult to express. It's highly personal. As much as I can, I like to keep it as explicit as possible, but sometimes that's just difficult to do. Knowledge of the project management should be done. I got to make sure that the management team is always in the loop. They understand, because they could make it very difficult to get a project accomplished if they're not involved. Now, for you guys just getting started, you need to look at what rigorous coursework you got to make sure you do to stand out. You got to make sure, considering volunteering to be in charge of creating a project, lessons learned, things. So stepping out of the box, not just saying, okay, yeah, I've done all my homework, but if this is an area you want to do, you need to say, I want to get out and try to do something else. Now, when you start and say, okay, now I got to monitor and control this project, changes happen. So you got to make sure one of the processes you got is how I'm going to monitor this project, how I'm going to handle changes as they occur. So whether it's, when I'm monitoring, I'm collecting, measuring, and disseminating, performance indications. So that's hours worked, issues thing. But sometimes I've got to baseline my project and then decide if, as the controls are coming in, do I need to change and change the project? Do I need to add more resources or extend a due date? But I'm doing that I've got to put together a project plan. I got to do, instead of what I call a baseline. Baseline is just a starting point, a measurement. This is how it was at a given point in time. And you're going to change these baseline as the project's progressing, as you make changes because of changes in the control process. Here you got a couple of examples. At least from a media standpoint, the 2002 Winter Olympics and Paralympics took 5 years to plan, cost $1.9 billion. But the Salt Lake Organization Committee was awarded a project management project, PMI award for delivering a world-class game. So they did things on time, on budget, return to profit. 4 years before the Salt Lake, let me use the software, Primavera software. And that's an online project management software I've used in the past. But it gave everybody insight as to what was going on and how to keep track of the project. So everybody knew where they were, if they're on or off schedule, what additional resources, where they needed to come. So it actually was kind of a cool example of project management at its finest. Now, performing integrated change control. And basically, I got to make sure that the influencing the factors that created the change to ensure changes are beneficial. I got to determine a change, that a change has occurred, but then I got to make sure that I've got to manage that as the change, manage the project as changes actually occur. So I got to say, hey, a change has occurred. I got to know it. And then two is that how does that impact the project? How does it impact the people? How does it impact the key stakeholders? How do I inform them? How do I, just let them know things happen? Now there are some change control for IT projects. One, you can have a formal review. What was planned, when problems occur. Projects rarely meet the original project goals, but when it happens, it's constant communication and making sure that all the changes that we're making are beneficial and that the project team buys into it. Because sometimes you're going to make a change that's going to force me to start over or may not be beneficial for everybody, and we need to make sure everybody understands the impact and the reasons that you're making these changes. So we're not just making changes for change's sake. So one of the things change control system could be, basically a change control system is a formal documented process. So we all know here we're going to have this report to track, this, what form somebody's identifying the need for the change. There's going to be a change control board, a group of people that are going to be responsible for taking all these requests for change, reviewing them, rejecting them, and approving them. And of course, sometimes those boards take a long time and the project manager needs to step in. So sometimes you got to make sure the policies are in place so everybody understands that sometimes these are time-sensitive changes and they need to have this process and the importance of that change process to make sure it comes across. Now, configuration management just ensures that the descriptions of the project's products are correct and complete. So it's just a matter of identifying the functions and the physical design characteristics. And then configuration management just says, I want to have specialists identify and document those configuration requirements and everything. So just some suggestions on performing an integrated change control. Globally, these issues they're worldwide, especially as the rapid changes in technology, mobile roaming and communication often cause governments around the world to take action. Policies to improve social well-being for people around the world. So there are definitely issues in project. Now, the last thing when you're doing this is making sure I got a closed project. When we close it, remember the close phase is I must finalize all the activities and make sure all the appropriate documentation is put together. So I'm taking all the inputs, the charger, the project management plan, the deliveries, all this stuff, and some of the main tools, it says I got expert judgment, I got to analyze it, and meetings, and more meetings. Now, sometimes you get software that can help you. I mentioned Primavera, Microsoft Project. There are several different tools out there that can help assist in this integration management. Which documents, word processing software, PowerPoint presentations, tracking with, of the activities, whether it's a project management tool or an Excel spreadsheet or a database. So the different tools can be used. Here's just a sample of a projectmanager.com of giving a snapshot as to what our status is. So some of these tools can be fairly sophisticated. Now, some of the considerations for agile adaptive environments is that iterative approach promotes this engagement of all the team members. Now, expectations of the project manager doesn't change in an adaptive environment, but how we control the detail of the product planning and development definitely is delegated more to the team, not to the project manager. The project manager, using any product lifestyle, should focus on creating a collaborative decision-making environment. So it's more of how do I make sure the people are working together versus me making the decisions or working with the senior executives. I need to build the team to make sure they know how to make their own decisions. So this chapter, we talked about how do I tie all the different areas of the project management together. So it's kind of integrating all the different stages together, ranging from developing the project charter all the way down to closing the project. So hopefully this gives you a good idea as to how project integration management is, and just one more step in the whole process of being a project manager. Have a nice day.